Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has completed 20 years as the Prime Minister and the head of a government of a state as well. 20 years in governance, including 13 years as Gujarat Chief Minister. In his public life, Prime Minister has emphasized of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas and Sabka Vikas. In governance, he has sought to usher inclusive development and oriented his life towards building an administration that is corruption-free, and also sought to bring speed in decision-making. But what has made Modi a most charmed leader who charms voters with his direct communication with them? Is it his style of governance? Is it his charismatic personality? Or is it his view of Desh above party motto? Today, let's take a look at what the public's mood is as we go through this snap poll. A snap poll which Times Now Navbharat has done with Insight and VETO. And in this survey, we've put 10 questions to the public for them to answer what is it that makes Narendra Modi tick as a leader. The first question that we asked our respondents. Before I go to that, I want to take in our expert on this, the man who conducted this survey, Karan Singh, Chief of Insight, who joins me live, who will tell us the size of our respondents, the size of this survey and how he went through it. Introducing to you Karan Singh, Insight Managing Director. Karan, good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining me on the News Hour. We are carrying out the Navbharat Insight VETO poll here on the News Hour tonight, and I want to ask you, Karan, what was the size of this survey that you conducted? How many respondents were reached out to, and how did you do this survey over the last 24 hours?
Good evening, Navika and all the viewers. Thank you so much, Navika, once again for the opportunity to associate with your channel and you. Before, I just want to take a few seconds to say that we conducted this survey on our polling app, VETO, Desh Ka app. It's an apolitical, neutral platform, and we basically raise questions and issues that matter on daily basis, and people across the country vote on it and share their opinion. So to answer your question, on the day of 20 years completion of Modi ji at the helm at the most important public offices, we basically went ahead and posted the questions that you had on the VETO app, and about 15,000 followers and voters of ours basically voted on that. And we also, through the VETO call center, went ahead and did about 3,500, 4,000 calling across the country using CATI technique. And so in total, about 18,000 respondents have taken this poll, 10 questions that you had asked across the country. Absolutely neutral platform, randomly selected phone numbers, and the followers and the voters of VETO are from all across all parts of the country, from UP and from Punjab, Uttarakhand, southern states, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, all across the country. Our followers and voters are there.
So about 18,500 respondents responding to calls, as well as an app that was put out. Digital India, the way it's going, and of course, connected India through phone calls. That's how this survey was conducted by Insight VETO. And that is the basis of this Times Now Navbharat Insight VETO poll. Thank you, Karan, for joining me on the News Hour tonight. Let me also introduce you, viewers, to the guests who are joining us tonight. First up, let me introduce to you former Minister, BJP spokesperson Rajyavardhan Rathore, also Olympian. I mean, how many things can I describe him by? Many hats that he wears. Good evening, Mr. Rajyavardhan Rathore, for joining me here on the News Hour. Also joining me tonight is Smita Prakash, editor of ANI, has been through a number of such exercises that we've done in the past. Also joining me is Shehzad Poonawala, political analyst, Shekhar Iyer, senior journalist, Joining the debate, Sanjay Jha, former Congress spokesperson, suspended Congress leader, critic of Modi, not very well liked by the Congress these days, but says what he has on his mind direct and uncensored. Thank you very much to all my guests for joining me. Let's go straight across to the poll as I bring up question number 1. And question number 1 that we asked our respondents today: most historic decision of Narendra Modi. Surgical strike, 31% voted for this. Removal of Article 370, 42% of people voted for this as the single biggest decision by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Law against triple talaq gets 5%, GST 14%, agricultural law reforms 8%. Most historic decision is abrogation of Article 370, and on point number 2, the second most popular and historic decision was the surgical strikes, stroke Balakot strikes. That's the way the people of India are voting. This is Article 370 is the single biggest historical decision made by Narendra Modi in his term as Prime Minister, 7.5 years of it. Let's go to question number 2 before I go to my guests joining me tonight. Question number 2, we asked the public, revolutionary steps of Narendra Modi. Was it Corona control, poor welfare schemes, Clean India mission, Swachh Bharat mission, Ujjwala Yojana, Ayushman Bharat schemes? Maximum number of votes of 40% have gone to Swachh India mission. This is the single most popular and revolutionary step. This was the first speech of the Prime Minister at the ramparts of the Red Fort in 2014, Swachh Bharat mission, and that has got the maximum number of votes. Number 2 is Corona control. So many in India impressed with Corona control, 30%, and 40% people talk about Swachh Bharat as being the most revolutionary policy decision and announcement by the Prime Minister. Let me get a top response from all the people joining me on the panel tonight. To you first, Sanjay Jha, considering that you're most often somebody who doesn't quite agree with Modi and his mission. So do you think Swachh Bharat mission was the most popular step, and will you agree with people who have voted for Article 370 as the most historic decision?
Well, Navika, if that is the public verdict, who am I to be critical of it? That's a public verdict. We have to accept it. There's no debate. I mean, I'm not going to question the poll or its methodology or the sample. Let's put that behind. But I want to make my own statement rather categorical at the beginning. When I look at the country as a whole, I don't look at one specific event or one-off development. I believe when Mr. Modi wraps up his term in 2024, he might win it again. I don't know. But this will be called as India's lost decade. I think Mr. Modi's reign between 2014 till 24 is going to be an extraordinary litany of missed opportunities, whether it's economy, development, I would say governance. There are serious question marks that need to be asked. One which we'll talk about, I'm sure, later on in your program, is the total inept mishandling of the COVID pandemic. But I want to make one significant point that we should not ignore and the viewers should know. You see, when you compare a prime minister, you invariably do that with the previous administration more than the ones that were there before. And Mr. Modi, since 2014, my good friend Raghavendra has been part of the government as well. You know, they have had absolute majority, which wasn't there since 1984. I mean, a government with absolute majority, I think, has actually performed, in my opinion, subpar. It's an underwhelming performance.
Sanjay Jha, you think the Manmohan Singh era was better, more decisions were getting taken, speedier decision making was there, policies were better, everybody was having a good time. Are you saying that?
I'll give you just 2 statistics to tell you why that era told you that coalition governments are not necessarily bad at all. Number 1, look at the GDP growth rate during the time of the UPA 1 right up to the end of UPA 2. It averaged 7.8%, and this is on the basis of Mr. Modi's press calculation of the GDP. Number two, Navika, we lifted 270 million people out of poverty. So for the first time, India saw economic growth and social equity. This had never happened before in the history of a country. I know there will be supporters of Mr. Modi on the show, but they cannot challenge these figures. And this happened despite policy paralysis.
Heard about policy paralysis in UPA too, Dr. Sanjay Jha. I don't know if you did hear. We heard it a lot. Rajyavardhan Rathore, do you think Sanjay Jha, saying that the Manmohan Singh era was better than the Modi era simply because, there was more inclusive growth? Do you agree with the facts that he puts on the table?
You know, my fellow panelist and my friend, Mr. Jha, he spoke about the lost decade. Now, undoubtedly, if anybody who has been lost in this decade has been the opposition, and certainly India would have done better if there is a good, strong and critical opposition. And the Prime Minister has always wanted it. Before we dwell on how the work has been in these last 7 years, we have to look back as to when the Prime Minister came in, what was the sort of situation in the country? You've just spoken, Navika ji, about policy paralysis at that point of time. There was no confidence in the government. We were not a global player at all. The economy was suffering. And there seemed to be, everybody seemed to have given up hope. From that situation, the government of India now under Prime Minister Modi has set targets for every scheme. And mind you, this government has actually met targets before the due dates. And which Prime Minister gives out targets every time? And very, very important ones. I mean, look at the mindset change for Swachh Bharat. Nobody would put their hands into a campaign like this and put their sort of neck out there. So the speed of work of this government has been massive. The scale of work has been great. India is now a global player. It's a driving force. You take every single scheme from education, the government has revamped the education, to the health sector, the largest health scheme in the world, which is getting executed. And mind you, one of the most important things was the corruption and the leakage of pilferage of money, which would not reach the grassroots. It's very well remembered that a Prime Minister of Congress government, Congress party, said very clearly that money gets lost before it reaches the commoners. So Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and Mobile, combining all three of them and creating a network where the money that's sent from the government reaches the beneficiary without any loss of it. And Prime Minister himself, his leadership for the last 20 years. Now, I'll quote Mr. Jaitley here. He used to always say that when a bureaucrat is serving, he's serving for 30, 35 years without any interruption. But a political person, he serves for 5 years. And after that, he is either rejected or selected by the people. And look at Prime Minister Modi. For 20 years, people have been selecting him continuously without a break. There's nothing better in a democratic setup than the litmus test of the going to the voters and getting selected back from there.
Well, the jury is going to be out on what Sanjay Jha said, but let me get the journalist point of view, and let me get in Smita Prakash first. Smita Prakash, I want to ask you. The first question was on the fact of the most historical decision, and 370 hands down wins. Now, this was a game changer. It's been something that's been sitting on the back burner for the last 72 years till the Modi government took, this by the horns and just turned it around in the second term within the first 6 months. And then comes the second. To my mind, the fact that people have picked Swachh Bharat mission as the most popular revolutionary idea shows that India, how badly off it was on the basics. Cleanliness, toilets, it's changed people's lives. It's at least women in rural India, at least women in many parts of smaller towns begin to see this as a major achievement, which is a game changer as far as their life and quality of life is concerned. Are you surprised that Swachh Bharat mission gets such a thumbs up coming in from the people of India that it even overtakes something like Corona Control or Garib Kalyan Yojana? Smita?
No. In fact, I'm not surprised at all, and it restores my faith in what people of India think. And you know, when we keep hearing this "public hai, sab janti hai," it's really true, because when he first came into office, and when in 2014 from the ramparts of the Red Fort, when he spoke about Swachh Bharat and he spoke about toilets. At that time, you know, it was the first thing that one thought was that Red Fort se toilet ke bare mein thodi na baat karte hain. You know, that was the first thing that struck, that why talk about it? And then it took a couple of seconds to say, why not? Why not talk about something which we were all ashamed of? And then it's come out there and say we have to rectify this. Why not think of revolutionary ideas? And Navika, it's not just rural women, urban women too. You've covered the country, length and breadth of the country as a journalist. You would have seen, I mean, suppose we were to go to Amethi to cover the election out there. You get out from Lucknow from your hotel. Women journalists would not drink water for 8 to 10 hours because the loos are filthy. You can't stop anywhere. I'm sorry, but I think every week I speak in your channel about toilets in this country. But we didn't. And Amethi was the VIP constituency, right? There's not a single hotel where we could stop and use the facilities. Everywhere that you went, women teachers you spoke to in rural India, urban India, they would not eat or drink all day because you cannot go to the toilets. And then what about the laborers who are working at construction sites? Why is it that nobody thought of making toilets for them? Do you remember during the Commonwealth Games when one poor official was roasted over coals because he said, "Hamare to standards alag hote hai compared to the West." And everybody roasted him to say that, why do you say that our standards are lower than the West? But they are. He was speaking the truth, and unfortunately he was trolled, and I think he was even suspended or transferred or something like that. So it restores my faith that people turned around and said, yes, Swachh Bharat, the most important because it touches each one of us. Rural, urban, upper class, lower class, caste, religion, anybody. The second thing which I think Mr. Jha pointed out, respectfully, I disagree when he says about the lost decade. I dislike comparing one prime minister to the other because, you know, even when you think about it, Mr. Modi was no accidental prime minister. Nobody chose him, nobody picked him to be the prime minister like Dr. Manmohan Singh in the first term was picked, or Narasimha Rao was picked, or Gujral or Gowda accidentally became prime minister. No, Mr. Modi was selected by his party. He won the election. In the 20 years that he has served in public life, he has systematically won elections and stayed in power for 20 years. So in this uninterrupted 20 years of power or service, whichever way you look at it, it didn't happen by luck or by plotting it. He won the elections. So, and if anything, I would say, you know, that Dr. Manmohan Singh, I even feel sorry for him because he had his number 1 and number 2, Pranab Mukherjee and Chidambaram, fighting with each other. Whereas here you have you have Mr. Modi, who has an able warrior in Mr. Amit Shah, who and his entire cabinet, who's there with goals given to them to deliver, and so it makes the task relatively simpler. And of course, he has the numbers.
Very well said. No accidental prime minister this. Well, Smita, I don't know, but today you've been at your fiery best, and I think a band-aid or two is something Sanjay Jha will require. Mr. Sanjay Jha, it's not always numbers that tell you the story. The story of women needing toilets and not finding them in places is a story, is a number, is a statistic you will not find in some of the best books. But this is a need in women, in people that they had, and this need is something that was answered, and it wasn't a political brownie point earning moment for Prime Minister Modi, yet he really went with it because it was the lowest common denominator and lowest common comfort facility that people of this country did not have, especially women. Let's take a look at the other questions. I'm going to come back to my guests on the show, but question number 3, which government handled the internal security of the country better? 50% of India believes Modi government has handled internal security better than all the previous Prime Minister. Indira Gandhi gets 10%, Rajiv Gandhi 8%, Vajpayee gets 20%, Manmohan Singh 12%. So the 2 BJP Prime Ministers till date, between them, Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Modi, 70% of India feels that they handled internal security. Modi alone getting 50%. That's the record on internal security. Whenever I take a question on internal security, I always do this. Keep your fingers crossed. We just hope everything goes well. But that's what India thinks, that so far 50% people believe that Modi government has a better record on internal security. Question number 4. And on question number 4, we ask this question: has Narendra Modi raised India's honor in the world? Yes, say 55%, no, say 36%, don't know, say 9%. 55% of the people feel yes, India's stature has grown on the global stage, and that's where Modi really comes in, building India's stature on the world stage. Let's take a look at question number 5 as well. And question number 5 says, which Prime Minister gave a strong reply to China and Pakistan? Narendra Modi 35%, Nehru 10%, Indira Gandhi 28%, Lal Bahadur Shastri 10%, Atal Bihari Vajpayee 17%. 35% people feel Narendra Modi has dealt with China and Pakistan better. Indira Gandhi 28%. Remember the Pakistan war and the creation of Bangladesh. And question number 6 coming up on your screens, ladies and gentlemen. Which government had the best economic policy? Nehru government 4%, Narasimha Rao government 44%, Atal Bihari Vajpayee 6%, Manmohan Singh government 8%, 38% Modi, 38%. Narasimha Rao is the top scorer on this particular issue. Narasimha Rao did better than Modi on economic policy. As far as foreign policy is concerned, well, Modi has done better. Let me go across to Shehzad Poonawalla. Shehzad Poonawalla, you know, I look at the economic policy statement coming in from the survey, and it clearly shows that economic policy, people are not too hot. They think Narasimha Rao did a better deal. But as far as foreign policy is concerned, as far as internal security is concerned, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has a better record. Your reaction?
Well, Navika, सबसे पहले तो आपका शुक्रिया अदा कि आपने मुझे इस मंच पर आमंत्रित किया, और मैं आपसे कहूंगा कि 20 वर्ष सत्ता में नहीं बल्कि 20 वर्ष जन सेवा और जन समर्पण में नरेंद्र मोदी ने बिताए हैं। अब देखिए, जहां तक इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी की बात है, हो सकता है कि कोरोना का जो एक इकोनॉमिक हैंगओवर है उसको लेकर चलते हुए आज कुछ रेटिंग उसमें कम हो सकती है, पर जहां तक इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी की बात है, ये तो बात हकीकत है कि जब 26/11 का हमला हुआ था तो उस समय के प्रधानमंत्री, जिनका रिमोट कंट्रोल 10 जनपद में था, उनको फली मेजर हमारे एयर चीफ मार्शल ने कहा था, और राज्यवर्धन जी जो हमारे साथ बैठे हैं वो तो आर्म फोर्सेस से ही है, तो उस समय उनको कहने के बावजूद भी वो सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक, एयर स्ट्राइक करने की हिम्मत नहीं जुटा पाए। पता नहीं कौन सा ऐसा कॉन्ट्रेक्चुअल ऑब्लिगेशन रहा होगा, परंतु आज ये सरकार है कि उरी के बाद मुंह तोड़ जवाब सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक से दिया गया, पुलवामा के बाद मुंह तोड़ जवाब बालाकोट एयर स्ट्राइक से दिया गया, और गलवान में भी हमने 20 शहीद खोए पर हमने भी उनको ऐसा मजा चकाया। पर सवाल ये होता है कि बार बार हमारे सेना पर सवाल उठाए जाते हैं, बार बार हमारे वीरों को अपमानित किया जाता है, जिन लोगों ने 40-40 हजार स्क्वायर किलोमीटर जमीन दे दी। अब मैं एक और पॉइंट जोड़ना चाहता हूं, उसके बाद बाकी के लोग इसका उत्तर दे सकते हैं। अभी एक व्यक्ति जिनकी फिलॉसफी है पॉवर्टी इज अ स्टेट ऑफ माइंड, मतलब उस बिरादरी से वो आते हैं, वो पॉवर्टी की बात कर रहे थे। पॉवर्टी अपलिफ्टमेंट क्या होता है? जिंदगी में सुधार लाना, ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन लाना। आज 5 करोड़ लोगों के घर में नल पहुंचा है, पानी मिल रहा है। आज ओपन डेफिकेशन फ्री भारत हुआ है स्वच्छ भारत अभियान के तहत। आज आप देखें तो 1 करोड़ से ज्यादा आवास बने हैं प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना के तहत। आज 10 करोड़ परिवार मतलब 50 करोड़ लोगों को आयुष्मान भारत के तहत फ्री मेडिकल केयर, कैशलेस मेडिकल केयर मिल रहा है हॉस्पिटल्स में। आज आप बात करें कि किस तरीके से 80 करोड़ लोगों को कोरोना काल में, अभी नवंबर 21 तक आपको देखेंगे कि वहां पर फ्री राशन दिया जा रहा है। आज आपको जन धन और जो आधार कार्ड और मोबाइल जैम ट्रिनिटी के माध्यम से जो 1 रुपया पहले एक प्रधानमंत्री भेजते थे और 85 पैसे खा जाते थे, आज वो 1 का 1 रुपया पूरा का पूरा रुपया पहुंच रहा है गरीबों के घर में। और ये क्या मखौल उड़ाते थे, मजाक उड़ाते थे कि कौन डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शन करेगा, अरे ये गरीब मोबाइल यूज करेगा। आज यूपीआई ने 3.55 बिलियन ट्रांजैक्शन पूरे किए अगस्त के महीने में, और डिजिटल जो रेवोल्यूशन आ रहा है तो वो देखने लायक है। तो मुझे लगता है कि जिन लोगों के लिए पॉवर्टी स्टेट ऑफ माइंड रहा है, पॉवर्टी एक्सपीरियंस करने के लिए वो कैमरा ले जाकर वो किसी के घर पे खाना खाकर पॉवर्टी क्या होती है वो एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, वो एक चाय वाले के घर में पैदा हुए व्यक्ति को पॉवर्टी एलिविएशन और ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन ऑफ लाइव्स ऑफ पुअर क्या होता है वो बताना नहीं चाहिए। और मैं लास्ट में कहूंगा कि एक लास्ट काम जो नरेंद्र मोदी ने किया है कि वीवीआईपी कल्चर, लाल बत्ती हटाकर ईपीआई कल्चर, एवरी पर्सन इज इंपॉर्टेंट कल्चर जो उन्होंने किया है। हो सकता है जो टेनिस खेलते हैं रात को शाम को वो नहीं समझ पाएंगे, पर मेरे जैसा साधारण व्यक्ति आज ईपीआई में रहता है, वीवीआईपी नहीं है। मुझे लगता है ये सबसे बड़ी
Kamrazun Chaudhary from the Congress also joining the debate, and I want to ask you to respond. You know, of course, Shehzad Poonawala has spoken about certain common denominators. लोगों के पास टॉयलेट नहीं था, इसकी तो बात, इसकी चर्चा भी नहीं होती थी. But that is an issue that has been addressed, and that's what this survey says. Internal security. People think that between Vajpayee and Modi, 50% Modi and 20% Vajpayee, all Congress Prime Ministers below that as far as their record on internal security is concerned. I want you to answer this, Mr. Chaudhary. Is this also an indicator as important, let's say, as comparing GDP percentages and growth percentages?
Navika, let me just tell you that India is always a developing country. Right from the economic liberalization of 91 that we have started the UPA government, till date, we have always evolved. Successive governments, whether it be the Vajpayee government, whether it be the Manmohan Singh government, or now the Narendra Modi government, you are talking about the toilets, Swachh Bharat, and whatnot you are speaking about. These were all started during the UPA regime. The Nirmal Bharat scheme, which was transformed.
Then why are people not associating it with the Congress party? Why are they not associating is the question I'm asking you.
Because we were concerned about development. We were never after a propaganda. The condition of the economy right now is such that we are competing with a country like Bangladesh for exports. We are giving 80 crore people free ration. The Manrega, demand for Manrega has risen the first time so high at this moment. What happened to the 100 smart cities? What happened to the Namami Ganga scheme? What happened to the other poverty elevation schemes that were there? Instead of that, the Prime Minister has rarely answered a question in the 7 years of his regime. He has not addressed the press even once, ma'am. And you are singing peans on his behalf. What about the biggest economic reform that wanted to demolish the the terrorist activities in India, Kala Bazari, all the black money and all these things of demonetization? Why didn't you put up a poser on your on your questionnaire?
So you are saying people are voting for Modi, on all these questions. They've not voted for Modi on economic policy. They've said Narasimha Rao was better in economic policy, but they're voting for Modi on Swachh Bharat because you think toilets are not as important as GDP is. I want you to respond to this, Mr. Rajyavardhan Rathore. टॉयलेट की बात करना, I want to ask you this.
Yes.
Nobody ever spoke of it because it wasn't something that you would get posters, printed on. It would never become an election issue. कोई टॉयलेट के बारे में बात नहीं करता था. लेकिन आज अगर टॉयलेट और अगर स्वच्छ भारत मिशन ऊपर आ रहा है, इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी ऊपर आ रहा है, तो पीपल आर टॉकिंग अबाउट दैट यस, GDP is important, but so are the basic necessities, and the Prime Minister has concentrated on basic necessities. Is that why Mr. Chaudhary is just missing the point?
I find this very interesting. They constantly keep repeating that all of these schemes had started during the UPA times. Well, if they had started, they remained only in the files. They never got out of the files. Number two, they keep saying that we are not busy with propaganda. We were busy developing the nation. What does developing the nation mean? 11 crore toilets have been built now in the last 7 years, and there was tremendous shortages of toilets earlier. What development was happening? When roads were being developed in the UPA time, they were being made at the speed of something like 12 kilometers per day. Today, 30 to 40 kilometers per day is the rate of construction.
I don't want to cross
gas connections. The gas connections have now, for the first time, sir, could you just hear me out once? Gas connections have for the first time reached the masses. So this is what is development. And development means ensuring that the entire machinery works in a good synergy, in a rhythm. And execution has to be very high. The entire government has to work in one direction. That's what leadership means. And it is because of this leadership that Prime Minister Modi has been in power for the last 20 years as the Chief Minister and now as the Prime Minister. People see it. And when people see a good leader, they start loving the leader. They start following the leader. There's a sense of confidence. There's also a sense of confidence in the bureaucracy. And so therefore, this development has happened in the last 7 years, which was not there at all.
Dr. Suman Siraman, you are a critic of Modi, you are a critic of the BJP government. I want to ask you, propaganda is the point raised by Mr. Chaudhary. Do you think Swachh Bharat is only propaganda? Would a commercial film be made on toilet ek prem katha? Why was it made in the Modi years? Why was it not made in the Congress years? It could have been, and it grossed 311 crores worldwide. It was a commercial hit. I'm asking you that something as basic as toilets has caught the imagination of people so much so that people have made films out of it, commercial films, bet their businesses on it, and done well. That is the question I want to ask you. Is it real or is it propaganda? Dr. Raman.
Yeah, Navika, talking of propaganda, I think that this entire exercise of this survey being put out is essentially propaganda. Now we have to accept that. I'm a little intrigued because I was watching this interview that you put out on the methodology for this poll. And it seemed very interesting because this app, which this gentleman spoke about, the VETO app, I checked out the Google Play Store and it has 5,000 plus downloads. So that, by Google's definition, that generally indicates a range of below 10,000. Yet 14,000 people had participated in this survey, which I don't know, maybe there were other ways in which this was possible. I also checked out a Facebook page of the parent company, which had about 9 likes and 2 videos, basically a poll which was done for your Hindi channel sometime in August or something. So it's very interesting to see the methodology and the manner. But anyway, never mind. Speaking of propaganda, the objective is to put this information out. Whether the poll was done, how it was done, I think those are all people like me who are spoil sports, who want to spoil the party. It's not fair.
You only spoil some parties. If it was the Congress party, you would not have spoiled it.
Navika,
you only like to spoil other parties. जहाँ मोदी की बात होती है, वो पार्टी आपको spoil करनी होती है. कोई बात नहीं. हर किसी का अपना blood type होता है, अपनी फितरत होती है. No problem. You always like to spoil Modi's party, but no problem.
No. How does an app with 5,000 plus downloads have 14,000 people?
Maybe you didn't hear the second part of it. There was
He said 3,000 people
calling.
by
There was a
phone call.
call center.
He said 3,000.
There was a call
Wait,
center, but
wait.
Suman Siraman, you know, if you had been so forensic in your analysis of the Congress party, you know, the party would have done better.
I have been
शहजाद पूनावाला, इनको तो आप किसी फोरेंसिक लैब में ले लीजिए, शायद पोस्टमार्टम बेहतर होने लग जाए।
कि आपको तो ना सुप्रीम कोर्ट पर भरोसा है, ना ईवीएम पर भरोसा है, ना इलेक्शन कमीशन पर। तो नाविका ने अगर सर्वे इनके चैनल ने किया तो उस पर भी भरोसा नहीं होगा, हमको पता है, हमें मालूम है। और दूसरे व्यक्ति बोल रहे थे हमने ये क्वेश्चन सर, हमने सुमन जी आप गूगल प्ले स्टोर
शेखर अय्यर, propaganda, the fact that we do a survey on the 20th year completion of Narendra Modi in a public office as a constitutional head, as a chief minister, 13 years, 7 years as a prime minister, you know, is something that is propaganda as per Dr. Suman Siraman. अब इस बीमारी का कोई इलाज है? डॉक्टर साहब को खुद नहीं पता, आप कोई इलाज बता दीजिए। ये तो बहुत डीप मर्ज है।
नविका, इलाज की बात नहीं है, सबको पता है कि बट फॉर द इकोनॉमी, परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ द इकोनॉमी,
अगर इकोनॉमी इतनी बुरी हाल पर ना होती, वो भी ग्लोबल इकोनॉमिक कारण और कोविड के 2 वेव के कारण, अगर ये ना होता तब आपके सर्वे की जो रेस्पॉन्सेज भी और डिफरेंट होंगे। The fact is, we have passed through a difficult time. That is why some of the achievements, see, after all, 2019 mandate was on the basis of several of these things. Now, let me predict one thing. Okay, by the time you go for the next parliamentary election, the Jal Jeevan Mission is going to be a great game changer. आज आपको लगता है वो प्रोपेगेंडा है, भाई प्रधानमंत्री जा रहे हैं जल जीवन मिशन पर बोल रहे हैं, आपको आज लग रहा है कि वो कुछ नहीं है, भाई प्रोपेगेंडा चल रहा है। But by the time the elections happen 2024, Jal Jeevan Mission is going to catch the people's imagination like anything. And similarly, Awas Yojana, the houses that are being built. Now, these are not sexist for a lot of us because we do not think these affect us because we have a home, we have piped water supply. But these are very, very important issues that are changing the ground. But see, and the Prime Minister, you know, in his latest interview that he gave, he made it very clear that a lot of us are not at all concerned about what actually affects people. See,
well, Dr. Suman Siraman, I know you don't trust the survey done by Times Now because this is not one intellectually bubblegum kind of a channel where only one certain propaganda goes. But I want to ask you, and I want to ask you this absolutely seriously. 20 years as a democratically elected chief minister and prime minister. Not one election, but at least 4 elections in Gujarat, 2 elections at the central level. Never ever has he got a minority government जो गठजोड़ से बनाई जा रही है, सेलो टेप से चिपकाई जा रही है. Every time he has had a majority verdict given by the people either of Gujarat or the people of India when he has been in those offices. Do you trust that? Do you trust the democratic verdicts? So what if you don't trust us? Do you trust the democratic verdicts that have been given to Mr. Modi? Do you trust the mandate that Indians have given him?
And of course, one trusts the mandate that has been given to him, and that is why it is even more, sad when we look at the state of the economy, the state of institutions, and so on.
Then I think you need to. Then I think you need to have a digestive. You need to have a digestive dose of whichever medicine that you need. I don't want to give out brand names because I'll be sued then for propagating one or the other. So I'm not giving. But hajma अगर खराब हो, digestion अगर खराब हो, तो उसका solution तो मैं इस survey में ढूंढ नहीं सकती हूँ. उसका solution आप अपने डॉक्टर के पास जाइए because I don't think you're a great great doctor who can solve your own problem. Well, let's look at the next question. Question number 7 coming up. On the screens, ladies and gentlemen, was COVID controlled by Modi's vaccine revolution? Yes, say 51% of the people, 41% of the people say no, 8% people say no, can't say. Well, 51% feel that the vaccine revolution, yes, could have solved our COVID problems. Let's take a look at question number 8. What did India get from Narendra Modi becoming the Prime Minister? A corruption-free country, 12%, opportunity for youth, 10%, improved image of netas, that is 38%. Improved image. So what Modi stands for has improved overall image of political leaders or netas. Reduction in terrorism, 30%. 10% people believe the economic situation has improved. So on the economic front, not very popular, but improving image of netas and reduction in terrorism, definitely something that Modi gets thumbs up for. Let's take a look at the next question. Characteristic of Modi which makes him popular as a leader: makes tough decisions, takes everyone along, big idea for developments, direct communication with public, clean and clear image. Well, it is the big vision for development that gets 40% of the vote. 28% is the clean image of Narendra Modi, 15% for direct connect with the public, 10% for taking people along, and tough decisions, 7%. Between these three, which is 40% people have voted for big vision for development, direct connect with people, and clean image of the Prime Minister, 28%. And the last question that we have asked: most popular Prime Minister of India ever. Jawaharlal Nehru gets 14%, Indira Gandhi 26%, Atal Bihari Vajpayee 12%, Narasimha Rao 11%, Narendra Modi 37% people feel most popular Prime Minister of India ever, followed by Indira Gandhi, who gets 26%. That's the survey up for you. I want to get in Sanjay Jha, who's been waiting to make his point. Sanjay Jha, economic policy, you are right. Many people don't think economic policy is the best part of Narendra Modi's governance record, at least as a Prime Minister. But control on terror, internal security, clean image, and the fact that he's the most popular Prime Minister ever. What do you make of it?
Well, Navika, I'll just give you a short response. What is happening today in Lakhimpur Kheri is a manifestation in a nutshell of what Mr. Modi's legacy is all about. Number one, he's divided society, he's destroyed democracy, and he's diminished India's institutions. And this is something that ultimately will be his final legacy. I do agree that he is somebody who's charismatic. I also will concede that he has got a very charming, captivating oratory style. He is capable of winning elections. I mean, these are remarkable attributes of the man. Nobody can take that away. But I will give him a D- on governance. I don't give it an F. I give it a D- because I have a very charitable disposition. That I can tell you, I want to tell my good friend Mr. Rathore, who said that India or the BJP inherited a highly devastated economy. No, sir, you did not. In 2014, the GDP was 6.4% that you actually inherited, bringing it down to minus 23% during the time of COVID. I agree, things have improved, but they are far from where India deserves to be. And I therefore would like to say, Navika, this is a government that flattered to deceive. And eventually, when we sit back and do a dispassionate appraisal, Mr. Modi will go down as a prime minister who let down his country because they were so obsessed with headlines, name changing, public relations spectacle, that they forgot the common man of India, and only ended up splitting the country into a very deadly divide.
Well, I really, pardon me, but I really don't understand. Mr. Rajyavardhan Rathore, Sanjay Jha says he may just win elections, but he's divided the society. He may just win elections, but he's created hatred between people. लोग बेवकूफ हैं कि divided society हो गई, सब एक दूसरे को hate करते हैं, सब जगह unrest है, people, yet people still end up voting for Modi. I'm not understanding how this fits into the puzzle that we call India.
No, that's because what people speak in front of the television, in front of the public is something else. But the reality, of course, is that even the opposition parties in closed doors agree that nobody can work as hard as the Prime Minister. Nobody can connect better than to the masses than Prime Minister Modi. They agree to all of these things, and I'm not surprised that Mr. Jha is now appreciating some of the aspects, despite the fact that he is representing the opposition. So, in terms of the scale of work, in terms of the speed of work, in terms of the confidence that the Prime Minister Modi has created in the country, also remember that right now is a global slowdown happening, and despite that, the economy, as compared to the other prime ministers, in terms of prime minister's ability to work, in terms of economy, is also good, is also high. This is despite the slowdown. So all of these things, the numbers that are being reflected, I'm not surprised at all because of the sort of work, the dedicated, the very well-planned manner, with a visionary planning, with great execution. Ability to pick up exactly what is needed by the masses, ensuring that there's no corruption in that scheme. All of these things ensure that people connect with the government, connect with the Prime Minister, and that's why these numbers are reflecting as what they are. And this is another aspect is that when you cannot play in this field, you choose another field. So I'm not surprised that in this debate, which is at a macro level, Mr. Jha has picked up Lakhimpur, So the point is, the ability of the Prime Minister to deliver is what has created the confidence amongst the masses. And that's no wonder that he has continued to be in power for the last 20 years. And I think, Navika ji, you very rightly pointed it out that even if we, let's say, we do not believe this survey, the biggest survey is the elections in our country. And time and again, repeatedly, the Prime Minister has come back with thumping majority.
Well, Smita Prakash, quick word from you on the fact that the Prime Minister wins elections, yet they call it propaganda. Are we saying that everything is hunky-dory and India is a model state? No, there will always be problems. There will always be areas where, there is more to be done. That happens all the time, whether it's our work, whether it's our country, whatever we do. But the fact is that people who want to be so-called detractors, do they see nothing good or do they not want to admit it, like Mr. Rajyavardhan Rathore says on television?
Well, I think it is hard to admit something which you cannot resolve, which you cannot solve. He is an election juggernaut, which the opposition finds it difficult to stop. Some speed breakers are there in state elections, but they don't know how to stop him. And the thing is that the kind of numbers that he has, the way he has won elections, he has unwavering support of Indians across caste and religious lines, across gender, across regions. I mean, even in some places where the BJP has a negligible presence, in those areas too, they think that Modi is a solution, that Modi is the Prime Minister material, that his post, him as Prime Minister resolves things. So, this is something which is, he's an enigma. When it comes to economy, I mean, the question wasn't on economy, but I heard many speakers speak on that. Shekhar and Mr. Rathore both talked about being a pandemic, economy right now, and to come out of that is a hard task, and that's why probably Narasimha Rao got it. But there's also demonetization. Probably the single biggest mistake of Modi government was demonetization, which was backbreaking exercise, backbreaking for the economy, and I think to recover from that took time, and then the pandemic hits. So I think the next 2 years before we go into 2024 is something that Modi will have to really work hard to pull the economy out of those two body blows that the economy got, so that he can probably, as per your survey, come to the level of Narasimha Rao and even Dr. Manmohan Singh. If you actually see the two liberalizations which happened during the UPA regime, Dr. Singh doesn't get as much credit as Narasimha Rao gets. People forget about all this
but
because of the perception
people always said, Smita, that if there was no Narasimha Rao as Prime Minister, Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh may not have been able to deliver the kind of success with the liberalization that he had to do, because he was never a politician in the official sense. Well, that's Modi ke 20 saal. That is Modi ke 20 saal. I'm completely out of time. Mr. Chaudhary, you look rather disappointed. Well, of course, everything is not in the pink of health, but clearly people still think he's the most popular leader. Can you even quibble with that, Mr. Chaudhary? Before I go, 10 seconds for you to answer that.
Okay, one simple question. You may like it or you may not like it. There are equal polarization between liking of Modi and hating Modi in India. People equally love him. There are even an equal section who hate him also. So that's the end of the story, madam.
Well, Shehzad Poonawala, that's right. You love him, you hate him, you can't ignore him. Respond to Mr. Chaudhary.
नाविका जी, आपके शो के माध्यम से मैं प्रधानमंत्री को सिर्फ इतना कहूंगा कि आज 100 करोड़ टीके लगने वाले हैं कुछ ही दिन में, एक मोदी विरोध या मोदी मुहिमिया का टीका भी इजाद कर ले, क्योंकि कुछ लोग मोदी फोबिया से इतने ग्रसित हैं कि उनको केवल हर चीज में नेगेटिविटी दिखती है। तो मुझे लगता है अगर मोदी फोबिया का भी टीका लग जाएगा कुछ लोगों को 2024 में, तो मुझे लगता है उनकी सेहत और बेहतर हो जाएगी।
Well, Shekhar Iyer, you know, Indira Gandhi is a close second, 26%, but Modi is the most popular Prime Minister ever. फिर भी कांग्रेस खुश नहीं हो रही। शायद इंदिरा गांधी, प्रियंका गांधी का लक साथ में क्यों नहीं जुड़ रहा, ये सवाल पूछ रही।
देखिए नविका जी, आपने नरसिम्हा राव की बात की। देखिए, the economic reform that Narasimha Rao brought was forced by the circumstances. But here is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is embracing the change. It is a change that he has sought from day one, because that is where we can move forward. Because there is a difference between the reforms of Narasimha Rao and reforms that Modi is trying to bring. And the resistance is also different. Because we were caught in a situation in 91, the reforms were the only way out. But today we are, it's a situation where in terms of the future we have to...
True, but one thing stays for sure, that if Modi and the BJP have to win 2024, then clearly after the setback of the slowdown and the corona, it is going to be the economic development, economic reforms that will have to be on priority. And of course, it will be Swachh Bharat mission and Har Ghar Jal and the Jal Jeevan mission that could be game changers. But will it be? Time will tell. That's all from me on the News Hour tonight. Thanking all my panelists for joining me on this Modi ke 20 saal survey. Taking your leave, taking a short break. News on the other side.